ladies and gentlemen, to episode 4 of the Next Gen TCG podcast. My name is Nick, also online known as Tetra Ninja, and as always, we have my co-host Zach Browning, Gem and Pokemon, with us here today.
Hey guys, how's it going? Episode 4, we're already here. Can you believe it? 4 episodes in.
I couldn't believe episode 3 last week. I will not believe episode 5 next week. It's just, I think we're on a good roll. We're still ironing some kinks out. We wanted to also plug the special episode that we did last week. So we record on the Monday and then we post on Wednesday every week. But Monday rolled around, we recorded, and then Tuesday morning, the big news that CGC merged with CSG last year. Did I get the acronyms right?
Last week.
Last week. And so we obviously didn't cover that in the podcast, and we thought it was big enough news that we do one whole special episode with it. Thank you. That's actually our best episode thus far that we've ever done. So thank you guys for that support. Kind of gives me an idea that you guys really want to just get to the news, get to the meat of it, the white meat of everything. So we'll definitely do more of those special episodes in the future if the schedule doesn't line up with where we're at in terms of the podcast. So yeah, let's go into market trends. And this is one's going to be very exciting for me because this was the first time that I have ever sold cards for a profit ever. Because we talked about this in the previous week where my first ever sale of cards was a Nido King first edition that I purposely sold at a loss just because I wanted to get rid of it. But that was in like 2016. But now I am full flipper mode and I sent some cards to PWCC. And then my auctions finished last Sunday. So I'm just going to go over and talk about them really quickly of everything in terms of what I sold, why I sold it, and just my overall impressions of like how things ended up. So let me just pull this up real quickly.
Nick, I can't believe you sold cards. Is this real? Should we get our flippers out? Just flippers? I mean, 5 years later?
5 years later, right? Just, I don't know, man. It's just, okay, so here's the reason. So I'm going to tell you the reason why I sold these cards. So all these cards that I sold, first off, were extra cards. I have multiple copies of these cards. I just bought them because they were at a point of the price where I thought that they were reasonable and or undervalued at that point. So that's the reason why that gives me incentive to buy them. And another reason why I sold them is because basically all the money that these cards generated was to pay for a Rolex for my dad. So my dad retired 2 years ago. He was a janitor for a while at a car factory for the majority of his life. Then he had like a workplace accident, completely blew out his knee. So he was on reassigned work for like 5 years as a bus school driver because that was the only thing that he could possibly do without being on his legs basically. So he retired 2 years ago, and then the year before he retired, that I promised that the year that he retired, I would buy him a Rolex just to kind of commemorate him retiring. Obviously, we know what happened 2 years ago. COVID hit, and we had a whole bunch of supply chain issues. Basically, that like completely stipend the influx of Rolexes hitting the market. And then once COVID kind of like eased in, I got the call because any guys who don't know this, you can't go into like a store and just like buy a Rolex. There's a lot of, you get on a list, you got to wait a year. If you buy multiple Rolexes, you move up higher in the list. It's nonsense, basically. So
it sounds like you're buying a trophy card, man.
Yeah, no. Just anyways. So it's just like, so eventually I got the tap that my dad's Rolex was in, and I was just like, you know what, I'm just to sell this to buy the Rolex, I'm going to sell some cards. And so I'll probably include some pictures of the day that we actually picked it up. So that is the reason why all the cards that I sold were to fund my dad's retirement Rolex. If any people in the chat's watching or knows watches, it was a brand new two-tone Datejust Jubilee bracelet, fluted dial. because that's his style, not my style. That's his style. But it was about a $15,000 watch, and so that's basically the reason why I sold.
No, that's crazy, man. So just Pokemon Cards allowed you to buy your dad a retirement gift. I mean, that's insane, man. I mean, I think you may have told me the story of your dad at one point, but I didn't know that, he hurt his knee, and then he also like I knew you were getting him a cool gift, but do you have the video, or is that something you could share? Or
I had pictures of the day that he picked up the Rolex, and he completely blew out his ACL and MCL, and then he had a full-on knee replacement. Yeah. And then what made things worse is last year his knee actually got the replacement got infected, so they had to go back in again. And then I posted a picture of him on social media inside the hospital. But basically the implant got infected, and he basically had to have everything taken out and re-put back in again. It was just a gigantic mess. But shortly after that second surgery, he got his Rolex, and then he was quite happy with receiving it.
You should have done like little cutouts of the cards and be like, these are the sacrifices for your wrist or something. I thought that'd be kind of cool.
It would be kind of cool, but I know. So Zach has my list in front of him. Basically, it was a terrible time to sell WotC cards, but I only had like 2 of them in there. That was the Neo Destiny Light Arcanine and Light Togetic. Normally, I estimated the value of those cards around $3,000. They finished around 2, so took a little bit of a haircut, I thought, on those. But that's what you get for auctioning cards. And probably the thing I was probably happiest was probably the Reviving Legends Burn Tower at 2.2. My take home 2.2. That's my net anyways. So generally, like, I'll go through this if you guys want to know like what I paid for these cards. My general process of sending before I send cards is that I wanted at least a 4 times return on investment. Which I pretty much hit every single on this list of cards. I got at least 4 times what I put into it. So I was buying like e-card lottery Charizards for like $300-400 when they were around that price. I think the market capped out at like $8,000 during the COVID boom. So seeing it at 3, it's okay. It's no, you can't get a better return on investment than that, right? So yeah. Same thing with Light Arcanine and Light Togetic. I just saw like we're at like a low point of WotC when I was buying those, just like kind of we are right now. Picked those up like $300-400, which is a steal. The Shining Mewtwo was not as great, but I think I paid like $750 for it. That's actually one of the reason why I bought another one of those is because with the Shining cards, sometimes like the Shining, like the layer of Shining is a little bit just off the Pokemon.
It shifted like up and down a little bit.
Yeah, it shifted just a tiny bit. And with that one, that was just a tiny bit shifted. So I kind of wanted a better, quote unquote, better copy, even though they were both PSA 10s. So I wanted a non-shifted one just because.
Yeah. I would love the shifted one. That's an error. You get 1 or 2. You get 2 different copies.
You consider the shifted an error?
I mean, some of them are more shifted than others. Some are like a slight shift. So if you ever look like a base set unlimited holo, most of those or a lot of those have like a really small shift in the top or bottom. But you get to Neo Destiny, it's like actually the shining part shifted like down a little bit. Maybe sometimes up, but most of the time I think it's down. And sometimes just a little sliver. You don't notice unless you look. You're like, all right, this isn't matched up. But some you'll see it's like a little bit more than a sliver. I think those are kind of cool. So
dang, maybe I don't want the guy to pay for it. Okay, if you bought that Neo Destiny Mewtwo on PWCC, don't pay for it, then I can just take it back.
You sent it to auction, man. It's gone. No. You sent it to auction.
And then a couple of Japanese prize promo cards, mostly from the LP era, which we will talk about a little bit later because that's one of our viewer questions for the week. What got me into Japanese. But yeah, copycats, burn towers, indigo plateaus, everything was just pretty good stuff. All in all, my take home after buyer's premium and fees was 16, just short of 17,000 US.
That's pretty good. I think that's amazing. And before the podcast, Tetra told me that he was auctioning the cards off, and I said, don't show me the prices. I want to see the prices like live, like on the podcast with you guys. And so this is really like my first time like seeing them all. And like going through, I think I'm surprised that some of the prime cards are what they are, because those are like the chase cards for that Heart Gold, Soul Silver era. Now that was kind of a lower point of Pokemon. There wasn't that much demand, but at the same time, like, what's the chase in Destiny? The Shinings. What's the chase and the Gold Star era, the Gold Stars? So like the chase for the primes, it is the prime. Like those are that's the equivalent of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now I think they're easier to pull than like obviously a Gold Star. They're probably closer to like an EX on a pull rate basis, but like when you think like of a Celebi Prime at $230 for PSA 10, like I'm a little shocked by that. Now it's sort of my collecting wheelhouse. Like I usually collect WotC, and then I'll buy some kind of cool cards I see every now and then. But a lot of times when I go to PWCC auctions, like when I get to 2004, I kind of stop looking because I'm better at the earlier stuff. But if I saw that Celebi Prime at auction and I knew, like, I mean, I would have probably bid that up to at least $500. Now there could be like 20 on eBay at under 500, but like when I think about like what a prime is and that Celebi, and then even Machamp, like that's a popular Pokemon. It's a Kanto Pokemon. I'm just a little bit surprised, man.
The closest I've had to like not my 4 times ROI was the Prime Mew. I actually bought one in person from Charlie Hurt Locker a couple years ago when he was up in Canada for, I forget what event it was. I bought one from him for like $100. So I was just like, it was kind of close to not making the 4 times investment, but it made it with the extra $80. But yeah, Charlie's a nice guy. It was fun meeting him and his wife, as well as the other local Pokemon collectors in Toronto. But I feel like once again that card should probably, Mew is a pretty popular Pokemon, so I feel same as with Celebi, both a legendary or / mythical Pokemon. So I feel like they're somewhat undervalued. And I'll be honest, I'm not joking. What I'm telling you is I have like all these cards, like those prime era cards, I have at least 5 copies of, just because they were just, Card Rush was just like literally giving them away at that point. So I was just like, yeah. So yeah.
Do you have master sets of all the primes? Like, are you missing any? Or
no? I finished one. The last one that I finished was the Tyranitar. For some odd reason, that one was the most difficult one to get. But yeah, I finished the master set for the primes.
It's probably Hisoka or Swolpoke or someone just hoarding them. There's like 4 or 5 Tyranitar collectors out there that just like love Tyranitar.
Yeah, the T-Tar has some good art. My experience is basically like a lot of people who are entering the hobby right now, when they come with their collections, it's just like the reason why I decided to send to PWCC is because I have 0 selling experience whatsoever. So I was gonna either consign it to someone either in the hobby that I personally know, such as you or my middleman, or I could just send the PWCC and then I just remove all like chance of basically anything going wrong. If anything goes wrong, anything gets lost or buyer doesn't pay, I don't have to deal with that whatsoever. I just kind of like wash my hands of the entire process. And yes, I do have to, you have to pay the fee, which is not insignificant to have PWCC auction your cards. If you want, exact numbers for PWC, what their fees are.
Yeah, it varies. So it just goes by like range and scale. So if your auction cards that are like over $100-$200, it's pretty, I mean, the fees are very good. They're attractive. They're competitive. But once you get cards that are like sub 30, sub 50, it's like, I mean, you could literally like just sell the card any other way and it would be better. Mm-hmm. So I remember I've sold I've had cards at auction go for like $22-$25. Then it's like you net like so low. It's like, I could have just sold that card for $15 cash and got more money. And so it makes sense the higher you go up. And once you break that $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 price point, it's you can be pretty flexible with the fees. And sometimes they'll even negotiate fees as well at the big auction houses. Like I know Golden, Heritage, like PWCC, like if you have an item that'll bring them views and help get clicks and bids on other items, these auction houses will help with fees. So don't be afraid to ask.
It's just another layer that, but yeah, basically the reason why I wanted PWCC is just because it was just the easiest way, to be honest with you. Just to enlighten our viewers, what are like eBay fees in terms of like numbers wise? If you let's just say you do the thing the correct way and you open up a store properly, like what's eBay's cut of everything that you sell?
Yeah, I mean, if you're new to eBay, you're joining for the first time, you want to sell an item, I would expect somewhere between like 15 and 16%, because eBay is taking their fee at probably around 13%, and they're also going to take a payment processing fee. So like that's probably going to be around 3%. I'm using round numbers just to keep it easy. And then once you use eBay for a while, you get a store. Sometimes you get those fees down to 13%. Or if you become like a badass like Rusty or Z&G Emporium or Dan or someone else, then you can get those fees down to probably like 5% or less. Or I know that they have some rates that they've not shared, but they've said they're pretty attractive. So, but if you're new, I would just think 15, 16%. But if once you get going, they can go a little bit lower.
I remember like when PWCC was on eBay during that time, they're like their percentage was like literally 1%, wasn't it? Was it like astronomically small? Just 1% eBay fees for PWCC.
I don't know what eBay charged PWCC, but that was like the golden era because they had such a good system to like take good scans of cards. You had sort of this like this perfect sort of example to compare against. They would just intake your cards and sell them through eBay. And it's like, I know they always wanted to have their auction house and this and that. And it makes sense. But it's like, if they would have stayed on eBay, it would have been like the perfect world because we could have just sent them cards. They auctioned it. It's basically like probe scene with customer service. I mean, that's like the easiest way to put it.
Yeah, the problem was also, but the thing is, with when PWCC was on eBay, they would not answer any questions. Like if you asked them like a question about like a specific card, you never got an answer.
Yeah,
That's what happened with my my Zard that I bought. I asked because I couldn't, because this is back in the day before like high res pictures, right? I couldn't tell if it was a thick or thin stamp on the Charizard, and I straight up asked them like, "Is this a thick stamp or thin stamp Charizard?" And just feathers. I got like no answer whatsoever, and I just like, screw it, risk it, just buy it, whatever happens, it happens, and then. A long run it paid off, but I would have liked it to be a thick stamp. But so yeah, it's basically everything that happened with my PWCC auctions. I honestly completely forgot about them. Sunday night, I was just like, oh, my auction's ended. Let's see what I finished. I was like, it's just like a second thought in my head. But I think what reinforces what we talked about last podcast is that we really are at the floor of WotC. Like, obviously, if I knew that my cards, like those two WotC cards I sent in, would have finished at 2,000, I probably wouldn't have sent them in. I would just held them a little bit longer. But because it was such a second thought. But like we talked about last week, like if you have like decent capital right now and you are willing to hold for a good 3 to 4 years, it's not professional investment advice, but I think that you do pretty well buying right now large quantities of WotC.
So like looking back, would you have auctioned all the cards again? Like if you could either auction them all or not auction them all, like would you send them back to auction again?
No, well, just those two cards. Those two cards. I think those two cards I just would have held. Everything else, like all those other auctions, I was pretty happy with.
Yeah.
There were some cards that I did send to PWCC, mainly the sample Pikachu that I didn't send to auction because I feel like I'm just gonna sit on that one for a while. Although I have multiple copies of it, it's just one of those things that like I don't know how well that card's going to do at auction based on like the schedule. Like it could just have like a bad weekend, because it's a very niche card. Like if you know, you know, but if you don't know, then that's the whole point of auctions, right? It's mass appeal.
If you get that Japanese buyer, then I think it would help. But that's the hardest part. I think that goes into one of our next topics here is, which I think, for market trends, the Japanese market is flattening a bit. And so, the last few episodes, we always talked about, sell into the hype. And I see everyone with the Mario Pikas, they've got, the full arts, they got the half arts. And I've seen so many people like 20K, 20K, 22K, this and that. And then right before this episode, I hopped on Instagram and it's like I see people saying 15K. So, I mean, to me, that's an indication like, all right, market's coming down a little bit. And I think maybe we might have hit the peak for some. And I think I've even seen some people say some auctions are getting paid for. And so it's hard to really gauge exactly, but it feels like the cool off is happening. And in situations like this, you really don't know till probably, a week, 2 weeks, 30 days out till you can look back and you can actually see the sales data and like what's actually getting paid for, what's getting relisted. But right now, it really does feel like Japanese is peaked and it's cooling off. What do you think?
We are just going to see a flattening in the market. I saw like a post by like the Fine Card a couple of weeks ago. It was like comparison of like the Robert Munch Screen Pika finishing at like 4,000, and then compared to the Fan Club Porygon also finishing at 4,000, and those prices, like that comparable doesn't make sense in my head. Yes, the Screen Pika it's a Pikachu, So you do have those species collectors. It's a very popular Pokemon. But that being said, there are just so many Scream Pikas on the market. They were publicly, I think they were handed out with purchases at the Pokemon Center. You had to like spend a specific amount of money at the Pokemon Center, and you literally got one for free from the store. But in terms of like the fan club Porygon, a much older card, much harder to come by. You had to earn points to get it. So it's just that comparable of having those two. If it were me, like that card probably would be around like if Screen Peak is at 4,000, then I would value like the fan club Porygon at like 10,000. It just doesn't. That makes more sense to me in my head, but maybe that's just telling me that the Screen Pika is overvalued at this point.
Does it feel like, in 2020, like when the Red Cheeks Pika went for like 15K, I sold one at 8K because I was like, oh, that's plenty. Like there's so many of these out there. Then like it goes for like 15K. It's like, okay, now are people chasing because it's a Pika, or are people chasing because it's a Scream? Now, I truly believe like the modern card market and the vintage card market are two separate markets. Like you really have to treat them separately. But at the same time, it's almost like, that card's, almost like 7 years old at this point. But when you think about how many of those are out there, how many Screen Pikas were available that you could buy, this and that. Like I have a set that I bought at 2016 Worlds, or maybe it's 20. I think it was in Worlds in DC. I think so. That would have been 2019. I literally bought like at the trade area. I bought a full set. I think I paid $100, maybe a little more. I got them all graded. They all got 10s. Like that's a set I want to keep. I never want to sell. If someone's going to give me $20,000 for that set, I would sell it today because I think I can buy that set in the future for way less. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
The last big sale of the week was a Snap Koffing. We've been talking about Snap cards for a while now. Not my cup of tea, to be honest with you. I personally think that Snap cards are some of the ugliest cards in the hobby, but that's my that's my personal opinion. But that being said, we pretty much, I think we could safely say, there's an established floor for Snap cards. I think we can both agree. We talked about it a little bit earlier before the podcast started. I think 50,000, regardless. So I think like in terms of like grade, at least a 7 or higher. You're looking at probably a floor of about 50,000 US for pretty much any Snap card. Even like a very low. Well, this Snap card was a little bit different because what did it grade again?
I think it was like a high grade, right? It was like a 9.5 or what was it?
Yeah, it was
CGC 9.5.
I think it was a 9.5. Yeah. So pretty high grade, which is gonna be a 10 now eventually.
That's true.
Yeah, we have a floor for Snap cards, which is 10. Which is 50,000, which I think is appropriate given the amount of copies that are available. 20 for the first run sets and 15 for the second run sets. What do you think?
And before this like auction, people knew that this was going to go from CC 9.5 to 10. So like that news is widely like known out there. I think the interesting part is like we're saying a floor of like 50K for Snap, and I agree with you. I think like 50K for any Snap makes total sense. Half of them there's only 10 copies, half of them there's only 20 copies. That is so few copies that condition like isn't even a big factor. But like when you think like the 9.5 went for 50, and it's like, I mean, it would be hard for me to say like a CGC 6 Koffing or a PSA 6 Koffing like shouldn't go for 50 because it's a Snap card. It's so hard to get as is. Like how big of a factor is condition? But you throw that 9.5 in the mix, like how much of a premium does it get? Because I really think they should all be 50. And we talked about the Pika earlier, that went for 270 in a couple episodes ago. If that Pika was a PSA 10 or a CDC 10 or something, like, I mean, does it still go for 270 or does it go for?
I think it goes higher. I think it goes a lot higher because once you get that 10, you open the door to another level of buyer, because you're going to get people who are not just buying the card because they have this strong desire for Pokemon.
Yeah.
They just have they have a ton of money and they just have the desire to own the best of the best. So you're going to like get a huge bunch of cross collectors, Silicon Valley nerds who play Magic the Gathering. You just have an entire a new cross section of buyer pool. And I think like if that was a 10 Pikachu, I think if that Pikachu was more publicly available, like it was just more mainstream news, I think it probably would have been higher. I think that based on the fact that it was still somewhat niche to our own community of Pokemon hobby enthusiasts, that the door wasn't completely open in terms of its buyer pool.
It's more rare than an Illustrator, man. Think about
Yeah,
that.
it's true.
Not as beautiful, but it's more rare.
And less of them have shown up than illustrators, right? Zach has illustrator you buy right now. Just message Zach. He'll sell you. He'll sell you one. But he doesn't have any snap peeks to offer you. He's got nothing.
I can't get you the stat peak, but I can get you an Illustrator for significantly more money. All right. And we have a new section this week called Steals of the Week. So Tetra and I were talking of a way that we can add some more value and something that the viewers might like to see. And so if we find a steal in the week on any sort of auction platform out there, we figured we'd share it with you guys and just point it out. And that's whether we bought it or not. So the steal of the week that I saw was a Ghost Stamp Pika PSA 9. There were actually two of them. They auctioned for $600 and $700 respectively. That the Ghost Stamp Pika is a Pikachu that came out of the Snap, the Zap theme deck, the Gold Strip theme deck, where it actually has a very, very faint sort of stamp on it, where it looks like a first edition, but you can't really tell. It's almost like it's like half of it at the top, but it's very, very faded. But it's basically a rare error card that people collect. I love error cards, as you may know. And these in the past have sold in the thousands of dollars. And when you get a PSA 9, it's a very, very high grade. So to see two of them go under the radar at $700, $600, we thought those were good candidates for steals of the week. And in this segment going up forward, we'll try to find at least one cool steal of the week and share it with you guys.
Let's move on to the main topic of this week. So this week, I wanted to talk about major inflection points of the hobby that really caused like a spike in cards searches on Google, card movement, inventory movement, card prices. So we've kind of broken them down into probably 4.5/5 sections of points in the hobby that really affected the prices and people's general interest in the Pokemon hobby. The first one is definitely by far the most important one, and that was the Pokemon Go boom of 2016. So Zach, you were right in there. So let us put on your nostalgic glasses and tell me how that period of time went.
That was wild, and nobody saw it coming. Like, nobody saw that coming. I remember that there was some first edition Charizards always auctioning, and the couple months before that, and I picked up two around like $5K each, and then I did like a huge error card deal with Rusty where we couldn't figure out how to pay each other, where it wasn't like goods and services, so I mailed him a check. I literally mailed him a check for like 10 grand for like his error collection. And I was like, yes, I got it. And then like the next week Pogo came out and everyone's like, I love Pokemon. I was like, thank God I bought that set when I did. Sorry, Rusty. Cause I know he misses those FPOs, but it was like literally like the explosion came out. I was living in New York City at the time. And I remember just walking around, Pokemon stops everywhere. I had my brothers with me and we were literally just going to like, it was like 5th and like Central Park South. And that was like the best spot because you could hit 4 gyms. And anytime like some cool Pokemon run up, people just run over. It was like everyone remembered what they loved as a child. Everyone remembered 1999, 2001, whenever they were in the hobby. It was like a magical moment. And no matter what, whether you entered the hobby with Pogo, the old video games, the trading cards, it was like the resurgence of Pokemon. And it basically made it cool to play Pokemon again.
Quick question. When you said you were living in New York at the time, were you present during that mad rush that went viral on social media where like a Charizard appeared in the wild and literally New York stopped and like there was just like literally New York froze and everyone just got out of the cars and went to chase the Charizard? Were you there for that?
So I was in the area, that was an area I was at quite a bit, but I wasn't there for when the Charizard happened. I did have a job at the time. I had to show up for at work, but after hours, I'd pop
all
over.
All people in New York had jobs too. They got out of the cars. They went.
I don't know. There's a lot of people in New York who probably don't have jobs. I'll tell you that, man. A lot of Pogo players, going full time already.
Yeah, it's cool. So the next one is the appearance of Gary on Pawn Stars, which is so I'm going to pull back the curtain for those of you who don't understand how reality television works. We're going to talk about how the sausage is made, basically. So the majority of stuff on Pawn Stars that you see isn't actually for sale. So in most cases, it is a very directed and very heavily censored bit where the directors of the show will actually go out and try to find interesting stuff and interesting people to bring onto the show with no intention of the shop actually buying whatever is being featured.
Are you telling me it's scripted?
Scripted reality? You are blowing my mind right now.
You're gonna tell me WWE is not real, man.
So, and actually, there's actually like, if you go to, have you been to the Pawn Stars in Las Vegas?
I have walked in the shop, the entry
The
point.
The real one or the fake one?
Well, they have like a retail one you can walk in where they're never there, you know, but like you can walk in, do a little lap, and everything's so like priced so high, like you don't really buy anything. It's just kind of like a tourist attraction.
So there's the actual. So if you guys didn't know, there's a store, the actual store, but then there's the store set where they actually do all the filming for the show. So there's actually kind of like two stores. So yeah, so Gary's Charizard set was never actually for sale at any point. They just thought this guy has a huge collection of Charizards. Pokemon's pretty interesting, pretty massive brand. Invite to the show, and yeah, and anyways.
Well, they're also neighbors. Like he knew Rick for a long time. So like Gary's like known Rick. Like he's been in collectibles for so long.
And like that point in the hobby was actually pretty important because it kind of Charizard being like pretty much the mascot card for the entire hobby. That the video on the History Channel right now has 14 million views for that one segment, which is absolutely insane. That's like Mr. Beast numbers. so it really got the hobby out there. So we consider that another point of the hobby where things kind of like there's like a not nearly as big as the Pokemon Go bump, but it was still another bump nonetheless.
You know, the biggest thing I remember from Pawn Stars is just Gary changed his email signature to Gary from Pawn Stars. Like that's what I remember. It's like, oh, okay, Gary. Like I was like, Pawn Stars is a TV show. I don't know if it's like that crazy, but you know, I think so with Pawn Stars. Like we're saying that's kind of like something that helped drive traffic and sales and you know just general interest in the hobby. The next big thing we saw was COVID. Now there were kind of a few things in between that. So like there's the Detective Pikachu movie that came out. So Pawn Stars was like 2017. Detective Pikachu was 2019. And while it did drive interest back to the hobby, it wasn't a major bump per se, like nothing like COVID or Pokemon Go or some of the other topics we'll say. So really when COVID happened, it was, you know, early 2020. I was traveling for work at the time. And I remember it was like an NBA game where Jazz were playing, you know, I want to say they were playing in like Oklahoma City or something. And then like Rudy Gobert and all this stuff happened. Basically, it was like March 2020 where COVID sort of erupted and we couldn't travel anymore. So people stayed at home. You had more time to list cards. I remember I had like 11 or 1,200 cards like on eBay, and then they slowly started going down. They slowly started selling. And then you get to summer, and I'm like, man, I'm selling like 20, 30, 40 cards a week. Like this is crazy. And then next thing you know, it's like you have this interest that's ballooning and it's growing, and these sales are driving, and people are, you know, they aren't traveling to work, they're commuting, they have all this extra free time. And then what do people do? They have more time at home to get on their computers and spend all the money they've been working, they've been saving up for. So how did COVID affect you, Tetra?
Nothing. I work from home. I work from home regardless. You also have to remember, like, also the interest rates are so low at that point, so it was really affordable to borrow money during COVID. So I think that's also another reason why you saw like these mass purchases and mass movement of product, just because people's borrowing potential was a lot higher during that time. So yeah, so certainly after COVID, we were discussing like if these two were kind of the same, but then eventually we agreed that we're just gonna classify them separately. But then we also have the quote unquote Logan Paul boom. So I was out of the hobby at that point. So you want to go with this one?
Yeah. So Logan Paul boom is essentially where, you know, he makes a video, you know, every week, every, you know, month or whatever on a certain topic. And he was going around through different people trying to buy and this and that. And he basically had the idea of, I want to open a first issue base box. And, you know, you got to think his reach at the time was probably similar to like what Mr. Beach's reach was at the time, getting, you know, anywhere from 5-10 million views a video. So when he makes a video about like Pokemon, like his audience is younger, they're, you know, that hyper, you know, collector, like that just super addicted, like on the phone, like attention span of like nothing. So, you know, when you pull a hit or you pull a charge, like, oh my gosh, people freak out. So he basically opened a first edition base box, and he had like 300,000 or 400,000 concurrent viewers watch this. And, you know, the packs were like a steal when you consider the amount of like publicity and everything that came from that. And basically after Logan Paul happened, which was, I want to say it was like September-ish, like early September, but it was like 2 or 3 weeks after the all-time peak of 2020 was like October 28th, like 2020. So it was like
Mhm.
people embraced the live stream, this and that. There were a ton of other live streams that happened. I know Stevie Aoki did a live stream that I bought into. There was a charity live stream, and I think we thought there were going to be similar numbers, but there were like 1,000 viewers. Like very, very different. Sort of. Maybe there's 10,000 viewers, but it was very different sort of take. Logan even did another box break that had way lower viewers than that first one, but it was like just the moment, the impression of that first box break, it was like unprecedented. I remember I was living in Chicago at the time, just sitting on my living room. I had friends over who didn't even like Pokemon, and we were just watching because we couldn't believe like the amount of activity there was in the hobby, and just all the traffic, and it was utterly insane, man.
We kind of talked about like how it's funny how like it's Gary from Pawn Stars now based on that, but we have to also kind of give credence to the fact that he was very strategic on who, because prior to the box break, right, we have Logan Paul's video of him purchasing. Yeah, so you kind of have to give Gary his props because that was a very strategic sell. Like, yes, it would have been nice if he doesn't get to that card doesn't get to the 200,000 without that 150 sale to Logan Paul. You know what I mean? So
and the
big
views.
props and the views. So big props to Gary to help push the hobby a little bit more forward. So then we also have obviously the PSA 10 Illustrator, the BGS 10. So short history. For a while there was only two BGS 10 first edition Charizards, and Gary owned both of them. And then eventually Logan Paul got his hands on one of them. So do you want to give the viewers a brief history on how that third BGS 10 Charizard came to be?
So the third BGS 10 Charizard happened when Logan bought a PSA 10 Charizard from Gary. He went to BGS. He pulled out his celebrity card in the back and said, I get whatever grade that I want. You have to give me another BGS 10. And BGS is like, oh my gosh, like celebrity fame. Like, what do you need? Like free steak dinner on us. Like whatever you want, man. And then they're like, all right, we'll give you a 10, man. And so they so the true story is Logan actually cracked the 10 Charizard, had it raw, brought it to BGS raw, and they gave him a BGS 10. Now, Logan, yes, he did take the risk. Yes, it did get a BGS 10. But the interesting point in the story is Gary had actually tried to get a BGS 10 on that card before and failed. So those of you who don't know, Gary's graded probably 70 of the PSA 10 Charizards that are out there. He's one of the pioneers of the hobby that helped with the PSA grading, helped establish a lot of things. And so most of the PSA 10s have gone through him, and he kept, the ones he kept. So by Logan, going and getting that graded, it's kind of like Gary's like, well, I already tried. Like, why didn't I get it? Why does he get it? And I get the point and this and that. And so it's like, I haven't held that card in person. I doubt I'll ever get close enough to Logan to actually see it in person. But I know that Gary was a little disappointed to have $1 million card go out of his hands, because that's an active offer from him.
The last inflection point that we have in the hobby is the entry of the Chinese buyers into the market. So this is what's causing the boom on your Battle Lilies, your Wafus, your Poncho Pikachus, your Mario Pikas, your illustration contest cards. So you go first.
Yeah. So those of you that aren't aware, basically the Chinese market did not allow any, buying and selling of Pokemon cards for the longest time. Then last year it opened up to where they can now participate in the market. And the closest thing, when people want to collect, they want to collect first edition, they want to collect the first. We have to remember this is a Japanese hobby. This is, it's a Japanese card game. The first for a lot of things are Japanese cards. Some of the biggest cards out there are Japanese trophy cards. So when the Chinese buyers are entering the market, they're entering the market in a modern set era, but they're going back and saying, what are the best cards we can collect? What are the best things we can buy? Like one of the biggest collectors out there is buying, illustrators, pulling them over to Japan, selling them to high-end Chinese, pulling over to China, selling them to high-end Chinese buyers. And so you're seeing this explosion at the top end of Japanese. And the very interesting part with this is it doesn't translate over to English, and it isn't translating over to a lot of other sub areas of the hobby. It's
not even Chinese.
Yeah.
It's not even like, yeah,
it's crazy, right? Like the top end Japanese is just exploding, and it's like, how long can this explode for?
Yeah, it's I'm gonna relate this to something that's outside the hobby because you talk about how like the market was really closed off for a long time, but I think the takeaway is that there's a lot of money in China, and directly, another section of life that I can see firsthand is that the Chinese like to park their money in lots of places. In Canada, especially around like the Greater Toronto area, we have the area around the Lake Ontario, which is called the Golden Horseshoe. Basically, and then you also have areas like in Vancouver where you have like a lot of foreign buyers buying up property and just like leaving them empty. Like no one's actually living in these condos, houses, new builds, all that kind of stuff, and to just realize it's like even though that like they're not, there's no one living in these houses. There's just like yeah, like it accrues basically the appreciation values on these houses, and despite what the government has tried to implement with making to kind of snipe in foreign buyers from buying up property and just leaving them empty, there's still the house appreciation is and the real estate appreciation is still worth their time just to park money into real estate and just let it sit there. And I think that's like it's another section that we can talk about a little bit later, but just like the Chinese like to park their money into places, and Pokemon's a pretty good bet.
Well, let me give you full circle on that. So one of my good friends actually does real estate full time in that Vancouver market and that lake that you're talking about, and he's been collecting Pokemon for a couple years now. He's a very passionate Pokemon collector. Like I've talked to him in person a few times, had dinner with him multiple times. Loves Pokemon. His wife actually opened a Pokemon store in Vancouver near that area, and like it literally is like there's like a true passion. Like I know that they're in it because they love the hobby, and it's crazy because like yeah, you know, it makes sense and this and that. Maybe that's who they sell to, or that's like kind of part of their target market. I think it's super hard to bust in the Chinese market, but it's like so it's like you never know who collects. Like literally the people Tetch was referencing, like some of them actually collect Pokemon and they love it. It just, I don't know, some of that stuff just blows my mind. Like you never know who you're talking to. Like,
Yeah,
like I know there's, you know, football players that collect Pokemon. It's like there's actors, there's, I mean, you know, I'm sure if you talk to some of the big creators, they'll tell you who slides in their DMs every now and then. But you know,
Justin Bieber buys Pokemon cards. He doesn't buy the right ones, but he buys them.
Yeah, he buys them through a management company, so you don't know. But it shows up on PayPal, Justin Bieber, and it's like, you know,
he's bought cards from you.
I sold him a card, but it went through like his manager, so it like it wasn't like his name. It was like all this ambiguous stuff. Like the PayPal popped up as like Justin Bieber, and then he had like an IG post one time, and it was literally the card I sold him on eBay, like in his hand. Like
that's kind of cool.
I was like, oh, it was him, because like when it happened, I was like, oh, that's not him. Someone's playing games. And then like a month or two later, I was like, it was him the whole time. Like, are you serious? Like, it was just cool to see him collect. Like everyone loves Pokemon.
All right, so the last main topic for this week, I guess it's not really a main topic if there's 3 topics, but anyways, the last topic of this week is the saturation of auction houses. So there's a ton of auction houses right now. There's PWCC, there's Heritage, there's Golden, there's Rare Candy, there's the tried and true, highly visible eBay that's always there in the background. So there's a lot of places to buy Pokemon cards right now. So, and then this next section, we want to talk about the opportunities there, as well as do we think this is a good thing or a bad thing. I'm going to start off by saying that the constant need to check everywhere is too much. It's just too much. Zach talked about those Ghost Stampikas that he missed out on because he was chilling. For some reason, Rare Candy's auctions finished. I guess it makes sense because they can't finish on Sunday because everyone's watching PWCC. But he's at a beach. So he's in a pool on a Saturday when those auction finishes. So he didn't get to see those cards. They finished way below what his price to buy those cards were. So it's there's a lot of places. And I don't think that's necessarily the greatest thing. Personally, this is more of a personal feeling just because we're very nostalgic because when PWCC was still on eBay at that point, we would literally jump on Discord and have like this mass voice chat with people, and we would literally talk about like the auction and how things are going. And with the way that eBay was run is very streamlined. Everything works great. You can very easily see real time what the price is at, when things finish at, what the prices finish at. You can really check because you have an ending page. And it was a good time. And at that time, they were only holding an auction once a week, once a month. Whereas now they do a weekly auction, right? So it's kind of like that special one time a month where the entire community would kind of like get together and just talk about like what are we excited for, what we buying, what we selling, all that kind of good stuff, where the market's at. And I kind of miss those days, and I feel like they're even further away just because there's so many auction houses now.
Dude, I totally forgot that PWCC was once a month until you said that. Like literally, like Golden didn't really have Pokemon at the time. Heritage would have like the occasional illustrator Scott would like auction when he went to his, like his little hoard and pull one out. And then I forgot PWCC is once a month. And I think the other point for these auction houses is like Heritage has 3 different types of auctions. They have their weekly auction, they have a monthly auction, a quarterly auction. So like you could have a week where you have 3 different sets of auctions, and then your Rare Candy, they have sort of their premier auction, then they've got a couple auctions in the middle that they sort of brand as sort of like whatever that auction is based around of. You know, Golden has weekly action, they've got their Golden Elite, they got their Golden 100, and PWCC has premier auction, and then all this and that. So it's like not only do you have like the set time in your mind, like everyone knows Sunday night PWCC, like everyone knows that. Eventually, people will have ingrained that Saturday afternoon Rare Candy. You know, but like when you start layering on these other types of auctions, it's like, how do you keep track of all of it? Because I even talked to the Heritage guys. I was like, guys, like I feel like sometimes you got stuff on Wednesdays and Thursdays and Fridays. Like I just got to know when to like log on, because I feel like I'm always getting these notifications like, oh, you're outbid. Oh, the auction's over. And it's like, you know, if you, I mean, I think with eBay, you can see like buyer feedback and stuff, and people know when you're bidding and this and that. So on eBay, if there's something I really want, I don't bid to the last second. Like I don't want anyone to see that I'm interested or bidding or this or that till like the last second. Whereas the other auction houses, like, I mean, there's all kinds of strategies and stuff, but it's like if someone could just make a combined sort of way just to show all the auctions across all the platforms. Let me just search one place and let it all pop up. Give me like one safe search that just hits everywhere. And it's like, Zach, here's a card you need. And it's too much, man.
It's too much. It's just, there's too many auction houses. Everyone just go back to eBay. Everyone just go back to eBay. Make our life a lot easier. But that being said, the fact that there are so many auction houses does lend to a little bit of opportunity in the hobby. Namely our dolphin friends, our flippers who are on basically all the auction houses 24/7, monitoring things, stealing Zach's ghost stamp Pika's PSA 9 Pika's, you know. So, but there's opportunity there if you are willing to invest the time into just keeping your ears to the ground and monitoring everything all the time.
Yeah, I mean, these are inefficient markets. You know, there's going to be arbitrage that you can take advantage of. It's ideal for people in the market. So you got to think the hobby is comprised of all types of different, you know, people. You have sort of the collectors that collect what they want. They may resell a few things here and there. You have the flippers who a lot of times they don't really keep too much. And if they keep something, it's for very short periods of time. They create a lot of liquidity in the market. You have some retail, you have stores that sort of have market minimums on things. So they'll like keep cards from going too low. So they'll buy it, they'll put it in the inventory, they can sit on it for however long they need to sit on it. And then they'll offer it up for sale for way more. But you have all these different people that participate in the market, and some people sort of criticize like different pieces more than others, but they all sort of add to this market dynamic, which allows it to sort of function the way that it is. And so by having all these auction sites, by sort of incentivize these people to look at all 5 of them and figure out where the prices are different. And, you know, I mean, I used to buy on gold and I'd send a PWCC. It was easy money. Or, you know, if you buy on, you know, whatever and send it, now it's like if you buy on PWCC, you send to eBay, that's easy money. That's kind of the trend now. But it's like if you can kind of stay in tune with that, it creates opportunity. And the people who are full-time who are doing this, it's really creating a nice living for a lot of people just to kind of monitor different pieces. And Pokemon is so big. There's so many different market areas. There's so many different little niches and stuff here and there that if you can become educated, you can stay in the hobby, you can focus on all these different little areas, you can find ways to just fund your hobby in a way that is very repeatable. I mean, the way the setup is right now, the saturation of auction houses, there's so much opportunity to literally do what you love, collect, and like take advantage of what the market's giving you. All right, so our next section here, we have cards of the week. It's where Nick and I pick out a cool card from our collection and we show it with you guys. That way you guys can learn more about our collection each week. And we can show you something cool that we're proud of. And so my card of the week is something that I bought in 2021 at auction, and a lot of people were curious who bought it. And one of my favorite things back in like 2014, 2015 was to buy a cool card. Everyone's like, where'd it go? Where'd it go? And I'm like, I don't know where it went. And 2 or 3 years later, it shows up. So my card of the week is actually the No-Holo base set 2 Charizard. This Charizard actually is missing the holographic layer foiling on it, and it's literally like you can see the number down there at the bottom. It's crazy. Got this at auction at PWCC, and everyone's like, who got that? I don't know. And I was like, I don't know either. I don't know where it went. So I left it in the PWCC vault for 2 years, and I just got it back in the mail like a week or two ago. So before,
was it sold as a raw card?
No, it was sold graded. So the crazy story with that is I actually held the card at World in 2016 with Scott in San Francisco. And he held it, looked at it. He's like, I don't know, man, just doesn't feel good. And the guy was asking $200 for it at the time. And like, I don't know how to put it in perspective, but that would have been very easy to do at that point. I was making the most money in my life at that point in time. And I thought about just getting it just in case it was real, just to find out. So long story short, the guy got it graded. It is now authenticated. It's considered real. It has all the layers and stuff. It's a little different, but like you can see the layers, they match up with the other Hallful layers. There's a whole article on CDC. You can look at it if you want. And I ended up paying around $16,000 for it back in 2021. So quite a bit more than $200, but it's a rare Charizard. It's a rare Charizard, man. But I hear it's not as rare as whatever card you may have this week.
Let me just. So you paid $16,000 for that Charizard?
I think it was a little over $16,000.
Holy crap!
It's literally a WotC holographic Charizard missing a Hallful layer. It's the only one I've ever seen. Like it is like I've never. I mean, I think I've seen other base set 2s that are like that, and I've seen some shadowless cards that are missing the Hallful layer. Like I know I got offered to buy a Clefairy like last week for $12,000, and then I've got a buddy with a Magneton and a Venusaur that's offering to sell them to me, similar prices. But it's like, if you get a Charizard, I get its base set 2, it's not shadowless, but it's a Charizard. It's like you don't have those opportunities to buy that card and that variant. You see miscuts and this and that, but like it's missing a Hallfoil.
Is there any chance there'll be a qualifier on that card eventually?
It says error, and on the back, you can see a certain number if you want. That way you can look up the CGC scan online if you want.
Missing Holo layer. That's cool. So the qualifiers on the back. Yeah, interesting.
They did a whole article on it too. So like the article's long and it talks about all the different layers and stuff and why they believe it's real. And so after reading that, I was like, all right, like I have no doubt it's real. But even holding it in person, I'm like, it was different than a Holofoil base set 2 because just read the article. I'll say that. This could be a 10-minute segment.
Well, we'll leave a link to the article in the description of the video if you guys want to do a read. I'll probably take a read of it later because this is the very first time I was out of the hobby in 2021. So this is the very first time that I've ever even seen this card or known of its existence. So that's something for me to check out a little bit later. But my card is more to talk about. We talked about it already. How WotC's up the floor, and kind of, I think like one of the poster childs of like the rise and fall of WotC is this upcoming card right here. This is the PSA 10 version of the Neo Genesis Lugia. So at its height, this card auctioned, I think it was Gary's one, the auction for like $133,000, and I knew that price would not hold. I was not holding I didn't run to my vault and say, oh, I'm gonna go sell this card for $130,000 because I knew like the next one would drop. It wouldn't auction as high. I think the next one ended up like at 80. It dropped down all the way to 80, and then I think we're at the low right now, about 28,000 for this card based on auction houses. And I'll be honest with you, like I feel like if people were still, this is kind of shooting myself in the foot, but I feel like if these cards are still being regularly auctioned, I think that it would probably drop all the way down to like a $10,000 card, if the market had its way of where it was going. Just because like the thing with like this card versus like all the hype Japanese cards that we're seeing is that like you can somewhat control the population of these cards in terms of how many hit the market at once. I think a lot of when people start seeing the card hitting around $28,000 for the flow of the cards, people are just like, nope, I'm not. I'm holding on now. I'm not. This card was 130, and now it's at 28. There's no way I'm going to send this card again to an auction house. Whereas with those other cards, there's just those hype Japanese cards right now. There's just so many of them. You have 1,000 PSA 10 Pancho Pikas out there on the market. So and people are just buying them en masse. So there's really no way when you have 1,000 PSA 10 cards on the market, there's really no way to control the market on that, just because people are just going to be constantly buying and selling. This card is really cool because like it has to be like the most unplayable card ever created, because it requires like 3 different elemental cards to actually do its attack. But first time Lugia has ever been on a card. I think one of the essence Pratisms is that it's rookie card, and not only the fact this card has a really cool story as well, a very terrifying story actually, because when I bought this card for just under $1,000, and you know how it arrived to me? It arrived to me in a plain unpadded envelope. Well, just that's it.
Oh my gosh!
Just an envelope, and I opened it because I just opened the mail. I'm just like, this is just a white envelope. I have no idea where this is coming from. I just opened this envelope and pops out $1,000 at that time. $1,000 card was a pretty big deal. I'm like looking at it. I'm just like, are there any? Because like I've had like cards placed in like boxes and like cracks sometimes happen somehow. I don't know. And then for this too, like first off, it's not only the fact that the card's unprotected, it's also like very easy just for the mailman to slip. Well, mine, thanks, bye. It was, I don't know. Have you ever had like a card mailed to you, just like a white envelope?
I've had people like tape cards to cardboard where they put the tape on the cardboard, and I'm like, hey, that's like the card I'm buying here. Like, you know, like what? Sorry, man.
I didn't even get the card, yeah. And this it wasn't like a local buyer either. This thing came from I live in Canada, so this thing came from the United States. It somehow made it in one piece. I have no idea.
What about those mail like processing machines where like the envelopes go through because they slip through really quick, so they have to be thin? Like, I mean, they could have like crushed the card.
Yeah, I have no idea I had no idea how this card survived. It got to me in one piece, but it did somehow. I was like, dude, you're so lucky that this card did not get damaged in any sort of way. Anyways, but
that's insane,
I also have
man.
a bonus card. I have a bonus card because when I was going through my collection of Neo Genesis, I saw this one, which I thought of you immediately when I saw it, because
Ampharos.
It's you, the first holo card in Neo Genesis, because Ampharos is one of your favorite Pokemon. You have a thing about electrical Pokemon with your Jolteons and stuff. I just thought this was a nice one to bring because it reminded me of you.
Oh, that's sweet. I was about to say, you just showed a Lugia. You don't get a bonus card, man. That's like too much. But if it's an Ampharos, we'll let that slide. It's pretty beautiful Pokemon. So
is the Aquapolis Ampharos your favorite Ampharos in the entire hobby?
It's up there.
That one? Yeah. That's I guess I should why am I not seeing this? Is it your favorite one?
I think so. I would say the Aquapolis is my favorite. Probably Neo. And then I'd probably say Neo Well, Neo Rev is just so iconic because I struggled so much with like Neo Rev over the years. And it's just kind of like has that base set sort of artwork style where it's not like attacking. It's just kind of just there in the picture. And I think the Neo Destiny is kind of probably the third, where it's like the lightning and the blue, the Zazz. Like you could throw a Jolteon on that Neo Destiny, it would like look perfect. But yeah, I think
the dark Ampharos, right?
Yeah, dark Ampharos. It just like that's just such a sick artwork, man.
That is our card features for the week. I mean, we try to theme them. I try to come up with a theme for everything that I feature. Eventually, we will run out of cards though, and we may have to do some repeats. But hopefully, you guys enjoyed. All right, so let's move on to the final section of our podcast, which is where we answer your viewer questions. And so, every week, if you guys have questions, you can leave them wherever you want to leave them. Instagram, YouTube is usually where we pull the majority of the questions for this segment. So the first one comes from Ernie Collects, which is actually a person that I know IRL. He used to work at Twitch as one of the big shots at Twitch. He left Twitch a couple of years ago, but I've read into him a bunch of times, and he apparently is a collector now, which is nice to see. Nice to see people getting into the hobby. So Ernie Collects asks, question for both of you. When's a time where you were over leveraged with a strong conviction, and did it end up working for you, and how long did it take? So we talked about how sometimes like deals sometimes take a long time to come through and finish. So you have that, and then you have to have the raising of capital, and then sometimes you're not always just doing straight cash deals. Sometimes you're offering trade value. So Zach has definitely done more of these types of deals than I have, because I've just been more in the buying section. So I'll let Zach go first.
Yeah, I've definitely leveraged a decent bit in the hobby, and I haven't really talked publicly about different strategies to make deals work and stuff. And I think that probably deserves its own video at some point. I remember a deal that I could think of recently, maybe like a couple years ago. There was, and it's hard to give like massive examples. So I'll give one where it did work out. It did have a good ending, where there was like a Gyarados up for 3K. I had already had some collection buys, this and that. I didn't really have, that wasn't really in the budget, I guess you could say, with sort of all the normal things going on. And so I basically went out of my way. I bought a first edition base at Gyarados for like 3.2K. And then I told my friends, I was like, if you guys want to buy like PSA 10 first edition base at 3K compared to everything else in the market, like it just made so much sense. And like even now, like when we say WotC's low, like you kind of have a similar sort of vibe, but it's like it just seems so clear. And I even told my boss at work, I was like, hey man, like you should buy this. If you don't buy it, I'm going to buy it. So I ended up doing it. And then about a year later, they ended up going for like 18K buy it now or something. So it was like a 1 year 5x return. And it was just one of those moments where I was like, this just doesn't feel right. Like why is this 3K compared to everything else? And there was a point where 3K was really high for that. I mean, I bought one of my first head base Blastoise 10s for 3K back in probably 2017. And so like it just, the timing of the market, the relative thing, like I literally bought a car I probably shouldn't have bought at the time, and it was just too good of a deal.
What's the biggest deal that you've ever done?
Cash deal, probably the VS deal, because that was like, I don't know if I've ever said publicly what it was, but it was, I paid more for, I know we said the one VS deal was 120K for like a couple weeks ago that we did back in May. The one that I bought privately for myself, I paid more than that for. And then that seller wanted all cash. So I actually sold a PSA 10 Shadowless Charizard that I had an extra of for 80K. And then I sold a Mysterious Mountains first edition booster box for like 30K. And then I think I even like borrowed some money on collateral, like to finish up the deal. But it was a situation where 2 or 3 of the decks had shown up. They've been bought by friends who would never sell. And it was a situation where I thought, like, if you didn't buy it, you'd never get it again. I had most of the sort of piece covered by the cards I sold. And so it was more of like just liquidity thing. Because you have to understand, like me as a collector, when I buy for a lot of these things, like when I buy that $8,000 Ampharos that finished off my Neo Rev Unlimited set, that's $8,000 that isn't going back in the hobby. That's $8,000 that's sunk cost. That's in my collection. That's not churning. That's not capital. That's not just, rotating this and there. Like that is gone. And so anytime I buy an error card, anytime I open a modern product, like that, those products are not for sale. Those are gone. So that money is just out there. And so, sometimes as a collector, you do hit these liquidity crunches where you have to figure out ways. And I think, I'm in a fortunate position where I just have a ton of extra inventory, and I could live off the extra inventory probably for the rest of my life. But it's just one of those things where I just had to wait to get sales that are better. I don't want to fire sell anything. In collectibles, you never want to be in a position to fire sell anything. So I just thought that borrowing the extra, it was a 5-figure amount that I borrowed, but I had it collateralized over $1 million. So
Mhm.
It seemed pretty fair. But I've used leverage a lot to basically get to where I am.
Mine is not as exciting because I've never done so I've never done the trade for value or like borrow money to buy things. So the most I've ever spent on a car was 14,000 US dollars, and it was actually my master's key. So my master's key I purchased from Chalk Trade Natural, the person who runs the very good Fine Card Instagram account. He does a fantastic job. Every week I've kind of like highlighting the highlights and like the highs and lows of the hobby and like PWCC auctions, all that type of stuff. So I how that deal ended up was he had the card, he was looking to sell, he and I wanted to buy, obviously. He was asking 14, and I didn't really want to stretch myself too thin because I was still at that point I was still like actively buying in the hobby, and like I wanted to make sure I had like a certain amount of money allocated just in case something else pops up at the time, so I didn't have $14,000 just straight up for him. So what happened was I actually did installment plan purchase. If you guys are unfamiliar with how PayPal goods and services works, you can actually a person can invoice. When they invoice you, you have the option of doing partial payments, and then you basically make those partial payments as however you want to make them, how often. So we had set up a payment schedule of $14,000 over 4 months worth of time. So I was at that point, I was just like, so I was just paying like three and a half ish every month, and then eventually at the end of those 4 months, he shipped me my card all the way, that card all the way from Malaysia, and then now I have a master's key. But there's also like that's just our personal experiences of like the most expensive stuff that we've bought, and like we thought we've been over leveraged. But there's also like in terms of like the hobby itself, there have been specific instances where being over leveraged it just didn't pay off. So we all like this was prior, way before my entry into the hobby, but I eventually got caught up to it. Was like the group buy that four E4 members did on the Illustrator. This is straight from one of the buyers, Pokemon specific. He reiterated the story, so this wasn't me just like reading it up on a forum. And basically, this is straight from the horse's mouth, basically. So him and three other E4 members, they went somehow an Illustrator popped up on eBay, and they were the first ones to see it. So they purchased it. I think it was like 16,000. To give you a time machine prices, $60,000 for a raw Illustrator. They group dyed it. I guess because it was a group buy, they probably didn't have the capital for one person to buy it all together, so they split the cost of the purchase, and then eventually they got the card graded, and then they sold it basically almost immediately for like 20,000 around there. So $4,000 profit, which is back then, which was a healthy profit based on how the market was and the difficulty of moving product. But if you break it down to like, I may have the numbers not exact, but the general essence is what I'm saying is like you break it down, 4,000 divided by four people, that's only $1,000 profit. Whereas if they would have held a little bit longer, based on how restrictive illustrators are and how rare they are to get. Obviously, now a PSA 9 Illustrator, you're looking at probably $800 to $1 million time machine prices. I know, but the reason why they probably sold, I didn't ask. He didn't say this, but they were probably the fact that they had to do a group buy to purchase this car. They were probably over leveraged, and that's the reason why they couldn't hold longer.
So I think we should have the Tetra rule in here, where once you hit 4x, you can sell. And they were doing the opposite of the Tetra rule, which is 1/4 profit, then you sell.
But exactly. So yeah, it's just that's one like one section of like the Pokemon hobby being over leveraged. But then we also have like modern day sports, which you probably know more about. Like we hit the highs of modern day sports during COVID, and basically kind of like quarter of where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, it just plummeted like modern sports. So, like, for example, you have the Jordan that went for 800K at the peak. And I think Jordan is similar to like the Charizard or like, there's so many copies out there. Like it's not a rare card to pull. It's a very common card. It just happens to be what people consider to be his rookie. And there's so many of them out there. Now, there's not like a crazy number of PSA 10s, but at the same time, like there's a lot of 9s, a lot of 8s. It's a heavy quantity card. Like there's a lot of dealers and collectors, like their goal is to get a Jordan card. Like today, a goal of a lot of people is get a first edition Charizard, whether it's a 5 or a 6 or whatever card you can collect. Well, that Jordan hit a peak of 800K or so at the top, and it's down around 200 or so now. And I think one of the fallacies of the hobby is, you think you can leverage and win, but if things go up in perpetuity, like it's just not possible. Like Amazon being $1 trillion company, like they can't be bigger than the world economy. Like it just doesn't make sense. It's not possible. Things can't go up that way. And so if you bought that Jordan for 800, you leveraged, and then all of a sudden it's down to 200. And, it's like, that's where, some companies may have gotten in trouble recently, and maybe a little underwater on some things, Well,
we also have like another one of those cards as well as the Brady rookie card as well, right?
Yeah, so the Brady was one that went for millions and millions of dollars, and it's settled a little bit. And that's the interesting thing about sports is like we're talking about the Bradys, the Jordans, the LeBrons, but those are the cards. Like if you're gonna buy something, like you want to buy the top 5. Like a Pokemon, it's like what's the best card in the set, or like what's the Shining or the Crystal or the Gold Star, this or that. But like in sports, it's like it doesn't even really matter what set. I mean, unless it's like a rookie, but it doesn't matter what set, what year. If you buy the top 5 players, you're going to be okay. If you buy Mahomes, you're probably going to be okay. But if you buy anyone who gets hurt or anyone who like is not, a top athlete, you're talking about players who had $500 cards that are like $2 a day. Like it is just catastrophic. Like what some of the mid tier to lower end guys it was too much for the hobby to support, and it just crashed. It was really, really bad. There's a lot of sports guys that have lost everything. It's actually really, really sad in my opinion.
This one was directed towards me. It says, Tetra, what made you get into Japanese promos/trophies so early, and what are some of the favorites that you have? So the reason why I got into Japanese promos, there's 2 reasons. First off, I got bored because I had pretty much met the majority of my realistic goals of English WotC, just because I got the stuff that was pretty much available, and then there's like another tier that I just didn't want to pay for. So your Neo Revelation 2 of the Beasts I didn't get. I never ended up picking up the PSA 10 versions of the Entei or the Suicune. Then obviously some of the Neo Genesis, your Heracrosses, Heracross, probably, and then Heracross being the big one, the T17 Typhlosion, never got that one. That's the one I have as a PSA 8. And then some of the Expedition. Charizard didn't get, then there's like the Butterfree, the Skarmory, very thick hollows that very difficult to grade, difficult to get 10s on. I just didn't feel like paying the 10 premium on those cards. And then eventually what happens is during that time, you, surprise, the more time you spend with your friends or your peers talking about something that you like, being involved in the hobby, eventually what you notice is that their interests kind of seep into you. And so I was on Discord a lot, on E4 chat, voice chat, and then I have like people like Mason and Adriana just and PFM constantly talk about PFM, not so much. He really not get into the trophy scene, but Adriana, like Mason, just constantly talking about like Japanese promos and just like how cool they are and just stuff like that. And then eventually I was like, I'm gonna do a little bit of research into these cards now and take a look at what everyone's talking about. And then what I liked about the English with like the Japanese market overall, which is like the most attractive feature of them, is just that there are so many more ways. Japan has done a fantastic job of offering so many different ways and opportunities to acquire cards based on promos. You have lotteries, you have special events, whereas English is kind of plain and kind of boring. And then in most cases, especially with like some of the most expensive English modern cards, literally pulled out of a pack. That's how you got them. You literally buy a booster box, you reach in, you pull a pack, you open it, hopefully you get the hits, and that's pretty much it. Whereas some of the most expensive trophy cards or the expensive cards in the Japanese, you have to go through like different layers to get them. You have like special events, Trophy King, parent-child events. You have national championships. You also have like lotteries where literally like people stand in front of a machine, and then the machine will decide if you're going to get a set of cards. You have Daisuke promos where you have to specifically earn a specific amount of points through events to actually earn cards. There's just so much depth to the Japanese market and how you acquire cards. So that's something that kind of like piqued my interest and just kind of like kept me engaged and everything. And if I decided to say, like, if you like generalize like what my favorite set for Japanese, it would definitely be the LP promo set. There's a lot going on there. You have lottery cards, you have national trophy cards, and there's just some of the best artworks. Like, I think there were like a lot of cards I sold at PWCC are part of that set. Is just, yeah, definitely my favorite promo set of the Japanese generation LP. So yeah, that's basically how I got into Japanese. How about you, Zach? You get into Japanese at all?
I love the Japanese cards because there's a lot of cards that weren't printed in English. It's like some vending series, this and that. And so that's kind of what pulled me over. I love the core set I mentioned before. I still never really collected trophies because they were just outside of the price range I was willing to pay, and they were always like a little beyond. So like they were beyond the shinings and the crystals and some of those.
Out of your price range, this man buying non-holo Charizards for $60,000.
One of one.
And you're telling me that these cards are out of your price range?
Well, it was like I didn't collect them as a kid, you know. So it's like for me, the best parts of the hobby are the friends, the relationships, and also the nostalgia. It takes me back to 1999 when it was all like innocence and pure bliss. And like what did I know? Beishango Fossil, you know, and maybe a few others. And so like the trophies, like I never went to Toys R Us and like won the tournament. I like went once or twice. And so even as an adult, like the trophies is more of like just a development of the friendships that we have, like you and Mason and you know, Adriana and some other people you talk to. Like the only reason I would ever pick that stuff up today would be because of like the growth in the hobby and the development. But like even today, like I would rather finish, like, it's gonna sound nuts, but I'd rather finish like the Japanese main sets and holos and tens. You know, I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but like I find that more enjoyable and satisfying to complete a set of Team Rocket, Japanese Team Rocket. I love that idea.
You do have some Japanese, like you have the Masaki set, you have a full set of Masaki. You also have like it's incomplete, but you also did the pre promo set. I know that we were kind of at the same time working on that set together.
Yeah,
obviously with the 08 is probably out of reach, but we've talked about the timeline before. Generally, people who get in the hobby, they start off with the original WotC fossil base jungle. Eventually then they move into Neo. And then the Expedition series is a little bit polarizing just because they changed the design of the card. So some people bypass it altogether. But in most cases, people start without those cards. And then eventually after that, when they meet majority of their goals, then they kind of venture into what the Japanese has to offer. And it's just a completely different ballgame. And if you like researching and like learning about new cards and learning about new things, and then Japanese is really, really cool. But yeah, our final question for the week. Geodoed or Gedddoed?
I see Geodude and I'm like Gedued.
Anyways, so question is, if you need to build a sturdy house in your backyard completely made out of energy cards, how much do you estimate that would cost?
Depends on how big of a tree house, man. Do we have like a bathroom, a collection room? Is this in a big tree? You know, like, I mean, how big is this treehouse going to be?
The question is not the cards. How much are you spending on glue? Because like you can get basically get energy cards for free because they're like throwaway into bulk at that point. Anytime someone opens like a ETB or starting trainer deck, they just literally just throw away those energy cards. So the energy cards themselves are readily available. You can get them basically for pennies, if not free. So I think at that point you're just what you're spending on like all the other materials to connect. We don't know. To answer your question, I have no idea. But it was nice to think about it and speculate. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for the Next Gen TCG podcast episode 4. If you've reached the end, thank you for watching, and thank you as always for your support. As always, if you have your questions for next week, leave them in the comment box below, or if you have a topic that you would like us to discuss, we will also do that as well. If it's a good one, we'll make it the main topic. You got anything going on, Zach? You're going to CGC to get your your cards graded, right? Your versus set.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to CGC, get the VS set graded that we picked up a couple weeks ago. It's a big debate within the group if we're gonna do new labels, old labels, subgrades. I think we're all kind of seeing all the news come out, this and that. And so I will hopefully, when I'm down there, I'll try to take some footage of the cards so you guys can see the grades and stuff. And I think it's very important that the people who the cards are going to get to hold the card and see the grade as well too. So if I don't show that footage in next week's episode, just keep in mind that it may be in a future episode. That way we can share that with you, or at least show you that piece. And I think that'd be really, really cool to kind of bring to you guys.
Lots of exciting stuff. Stay tuned to next week to find out. And yeah, every Wednesday expect a new podcast, and we'll see you guys next time.
Come back next week. Episode 5 is his favorite. 5 is his favorite number. You got to be here for next week. See you guys.
I got to bring the fire next week.